They say revenge is a dish best served cold. In my case, it took precisely 5 years to prepare, and I served it on a gleaming silver platter in the executive boardroom of Meridian Publishing. The look on Daniel Crawford's face when I slid the acquisition papers across the polished mahogany table was worth every moment of patience. "This has to be some kind of mistake," he said, his voice barely above a whisper as he stared at the company letterhead that now bore my name. I smiled, savoring the moment I'd imagined countless times. "No mistake, Daniel. Effective immediately. I am the majority owner of Meridian Publishing. Your services as CEO are no longer required. But I should start at the beginning. My name is Rebecca Chen. 6 years ago, I was the rising star at Meridian Publishing, one of the city's most prestigious independent publishing houses. Founded in the 1950s, Meridian had a reputation for literary excellence and discovering extraordinary new voices. I joined as an editorial assistant and worked my way up to senior editor by age 30, building a portfolio of award-winning authors and commercial successes. Daniel Crawford was Meridian's golden boy, the founder's protege, who'd been groomed for leadership since college. With his perfect suits, Ivy League education, and practiced charm, he looked the part of a publishing executive. What he lacked in actual editing experience or literary instinct, he made up for in competence and connections. When the founder, Eleanor Meridian, announced her retirement, everyone assumed Daniel would take over as CEO, but in her final act of leadership, Eleanor surprised everyone by announcing a merit-based succession plan. For 1 year, both Daniel and I would oversee different divisions of the company. At the end of that period, the board would evaluate our performance and select the new CEO. "Publishing is changing," Eleanor told us over dinner at her elegant brownstone. "Meridian needs leadership that understands both tradition and innovation. I believe in fair competition." She raised her glass, her eyes twinkling. "May the best publisher win." I worked tirelessly that year. I revitalized our digital strategy, launched a successful podcast featuring our authors, and signed 3 debut novelists who went on to become bestsellers. My division's profits increased by 22% while maintaining the literary quality that had always been Meridian's hallmark. Daniel, meanwhile, focused on appearances. He hosted lavish parties for the literary elite, gave interviews about the future of publishing, and cultivated relationships with board members. His division's performance was respectable but unexceptional. As the board's decision approached, I felt cautiously optimistic. The numbers were on my side. Several board members had expressed appreciation for my innovative approaches. Even some of Daniel's allies had begun to recognize my contributions. The night before the announcement, Eleanor called me. "You've done remarkable work, Rebecca," she said. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that." I should have recognized the warning in her words. The next morning, the board announced Daniel Crawford as Meridian's new CEO. While both candidates demonstrated exceptional qualities, the board chair read from a prepared statement, "We believe Daniel's vision for Meridian's future aligns more closely with the company's heritage and long-term interests." Later, I learned that Daniel had spent the final weeks before the decision spreading rumors about my radical plans to dismantle Meridian's legacy. He suggested I would sacrifice quality for commercial success, that I lacked respect for the company's history. He even implied I was planning to leave for a competitor if not selected, making me a risky choice. None of it was true, but the whisper campaign had worked. 3 key board members had changed their votes at the last minute. Daniel wasted no time establishing his authority. Within a month, he reorganized the editorial department, diluting my responsibilities and promoting his allies. He took credit for my digital initiatives while dismissing the authors I championed as niche interests. When I challenged him in meetings, he would smile indulgently and talk about the bigger picture that perhaps you don't see from your position. 6 months into Daniel's leadership, he called me into his office, my former mentor Eleanor's office, now redecorated with modern art and sleek furniture that erased her presence. "Rebecca, I value your contributions," he began, his tone suggesting exactly the opposite. "But I think it's time we discuss your future at Meridian." The discussion was brief and one-sided. My position was being eliminated in a restructuring. I was being offered a lesser role, with a significant pay cut or a severance package. The message was clear: Daniel wanted me gone but preferred I leave voluntarily. "I'm giving you the courtesy of a choice because of your history with the company," he said, his practiced sympathy not reaching his eyes. I maintained my composure, thanked him for his consideration, and said I would need time to think about it. Back in my office, I closed the door and allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to feel the full force of my anger and disappointment. Then I began to plan. The next day, I accepted the severance package with a grace that clearly surprised Daniel. I even agreed to his suggestion of announcing that I was leaving to pursue other opportunities. I smiled through the awkward goodbye, gathering the accepted parting gift, one I would later donate unopened, and walked out of Meridian Publishing with nothing but my reputation and a determination that this would not be the end of my story. What happened next must have seemed predictable to Daniel. I started a small literary agency. This fit his narrative, the editor who couldn't handle the business side of publishing retreating to a safer, smaller role in the industry. What he didn't know was that this was merely phase one of a longer strategy. My agency, Phoenix Literary, quickly gained a reputation for discovering exceptional new talent and for its innovative approach to author development. I brought on talented editors who had been overlooked or undervalued at larger houses. We embraced digital platforms and non-traditional publishing models alongside traditional approaches. Within 2 years, Phoenix represented some of the most exciting voices in literature. During this time, I maintained cordial relationships with Meridian's editors, many of whom had been my colleagues. I heard about Daniel's increasingly erratic leadership, his focus on splashy acquisitions over sustainable growth, his alienation of longtime authors. Under his direction, Meridian was still prestigious, but increasingly unstable. What Daniel also didn't know was that I had been meeting regularly with Eleanor Meridian, who had watched the company's evolution with growing concern. Though she no longer had operational control, she still held significant shares, as did several family members who trusted her judgment. I made a mistake, she told me over dinner in her garden 3 years after my departure. I should have been more explicit about my wishes for the company's future. The board misinterpreted my silence as endorsement. Meanwhile, I had been carefully investing my earnings and building relationships with select investors who shared my vision for what publishing could be. With Eleanor's guidance, I began quietly purchasing available Meridian stock whenever it came on the market. The opportunity one had been waiting for arrived when Daniel made his most ambitious move yet, attempting to acquire a smaller rival publisher using primarily debt financing. The deal would have given him control of several prestigious literary prizes and a valuable backlist, but the financial structure was precarious at best. 2 board members resigned in protest of the acquisition, citing concerns about Meridian's financial stability. The company's stock dropped on the news, creating the perfect moment for my final move. Working with Eleanor and a group of aligned investors, I accumulated enough additional shares to gain controlling interest in Meridian Publishing. The legal team coordinated the transaction perfectly, ensuring that Daniel had no warning until it was complete. Which brings us back to that boardroom, Daniel staring at the acquisition papers in disbelief and my calm announcement that his services were no longer required. "This is impossible," he repeated, looking around the table at board members who had already been briefed about the change in ownership. "You can't just walk in here and take over." "Actually, that's exactly what I've done," I replied, though unlike some leadership transitions, this one is based entirely on merit and transparent financial transactions. The board chair, who had supported my original candidacy years earlier, cleared his throat. "Daniel, the ownership documents are in order. Miss Chen now holds controlling interest in Meridian Publishing." Daniel's face flushed. "This is about revenge. You've held a grudge all these years. This is about stewardship," I interrupted, my voice level. "Meridian deserves leadership that respects its legacy while embracing its future. The company's declining performance under your direction speaks for itself." I slid a second document across the table. "Your severance package. I believe you'll find it fair. You have until the end of the week to clear your office." The restructuring of Meridian took time, but the publishing industry is ultimately built on relationships, and those I had cultivated served me well. We retained the company's commitment to literary excellence while expanding into new markets and formats. Many talented editors who had left during Daniel's tenure returned, bringing valuable authors with them. Eleanor Meridian attended the company's 70th anniversary celebration, beaming as she raised a toast to Rebecca Chen, who understood that true leadership is about building something that outlasts you. And Daniel? He launched a literary consultancy that struggled for 2 years before folding. Last I heard, he had taken a position at his father-in-law's investment firm, far from the publishing world. 6 months ago, a young editor came to my office seeking advice. She had been passed over for promotion despite outstanding performance, while her less qualified male colleague had advanced. "How do you handle the unfairness?" she asked, frustration evident in her voice. How do you not let it consume you? I considered the question carefully, thinking of the 5 years I had spent working toward a goal that had sometimes seemed impossible. Channel it, I told her. Use that energy, not for anger, but for focus. Create something so undeniably excellent that it becomes impossible to ignore. And remember that sometimes, the direct path isn't the only path, or even the best one. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. Also, I added with a small smile, keep meticulous records. Documentation is power. As she left my office with renewed determination, I turned to the window, overlooking the city where I had lost and then regained my professional home. On my desk sat a small wooden box Eleanor had given me, containing the original Meridian Publishing logo stamp from 1952. Publishing is about legacy, she had said when presenting it to me, about whose stories get told, and who gets to tell them. In the end, I realized that was what my own journey had been about too, not just reclaiming what was taken from me, but ensuring that the right stories, and the right storytellers, would always have a home.